Imagine giving Godzilla a pair of wings, putting a saddle on that bad boy, and riding him as your trusty steed into the battlefields of a medieval civil war. Besides being a certified hell yeah moment, you'd pretty much have the plot for HBO's House of the Dragon right there. For this episode, we're taking a break from the usual gauntlet of zombies, slashers, and death games to bring you an in-depth look at these giant fire-breathing lizards because, let's be honest, who doesn't love a good old-fashioned dragon fight? We're going to break down each of the dragons and dragon riders' unique styles and abilities, rank them according to how we think they stack up, and of course, try to come up with some strategies for how to defeat them on the fields of battle without being roasted like a Gascari marshmallow. This is how to beat the dragons of Westeros in the Game of Thrones universe. Speaking of Game of Thrones though, Game of Thrones Legends is the sponsor for today's episode. In this new game, you'll dive into epic RPG puzzle adventures, where you'll assemble a powerful team within the Game of Thrones universe, and fight alongside them in thrilling battles. Collect legendary champions, each with unique skills and abilities. Pair them up strategically and equip them with iconic weapons, straight from the shows, to forge the ultimate fighting force. It's not all about collecting though. Mastering the art of the puzzle match will be key to ascending the Iron Throne. You may even recognize a dragon or two that we're about to discuss. Now let's take a minute to go over a quick recap on the history of the dragons, and where these amazing and terrifying beasts all came from in the first place. Their story goes something like this. Way back in the day, several thousand years ago, the very first wild dragons made their homes in the 14 Flames, a chain of massive volcanoes that crossed the top of the Valerian Peninsula on the continent of Essos across the narrow sea. The local Valerian shepherds, who were once a peaceful culture, discovered the dragons in their lairs, tamed them with magic, and eventually learned to ride them into battle, using their incredible size and power to lay waste to their enemies' armies with ease. As they continued to stack up victories and the bodies of their foes, the Valerians eventually expanded their influence across the entire continent, defeating their greatest rival, the Giscari Empire, and forming the Valerian Freehold, the most powerful empire in the history of the world. Of course, this power quickly went to their heads, as the Valerians almost immediately became the most cruel and brutal rulers that the continent had ever seen. But after nearly 5,000 years of their reign of terror, karma came back around in the form of a tiny little apocalypse called the Doom of Valeria, where those same volcanoes that the dragons once called home suddenly erupted all at the same time, destroying the Valerian capital and killing off nearly all of their resting dragons in the blink of an eye. The blink of an eye is also pretty much all the time you'll have if you want to be successful in Game of Thrones Legends as well. Quick decision making throughout RPG puzzle battles will differentiate you from the pack as you battle your way through the game against both real and NPC players. That was pretty much the end of the Valerian Freehold, but not quite the end of the Valerians and their dragons, at least for now. As luck, or maybe fate, would have it, the Valerian royal family, the Targaryens, managed to survive the Doom along with the last of the Valerian dragons, since they were safely posted up on their island fortress of Dragonstone off the coast of Westeros. From there, a little fella by the name of Aegon the Conqueror used his dragons to, you guessed it, conquer that entire continent, and unify the 7 kingdoms of Westeros under the rule of the Iron Throne, which he forged out of the captured swords of his enemies. Things were going pretty good for the Targaryens until about 150 years later, when they all decided to kill each other in a brutal civil war known as the Dance of the Dragons. Which brings us up to speed with where we are now in the show. Now, if you're a fan of the series, then you already know that the dragons were finally considered to be extinct by the end of the war, until another century and a half later when a blonde-haired orphan girl named Daenerys was given 3 petrified eggs for a wedding gift. It's safe to say that nobody thought those eggs were actually gonna hatch, but Daenerys proved the haters wrong when she carried them into the flames of her husband's funeral pyre, and walked out with the first baby dragons in over 100 years, and the rest, as they say, is history, or the plot of Game of Thrones Season 2 through 8. Same thing. Alright, so now that we're all caught up on our history lesson, I think that it's just about time for us to move on to the real stars of the show. Those colossal, fire-breathing reptiles with wings called dragons. Let's start by breaking down each of their different attributes and personalities, and see how they'd stack up against each other in a fight. We can't talk dragons without giving a quick shout out to Dany and her 3 boys, Drogon, Rhaegal, and Viserion. By far the largest and most aggressive of the 3 is Drogon, who serves as Dany's personal mount. After 7 years, Drogon grew to be about the size of a large whale, and his black and red scales giving him a distinct, menacing look. His fire is powerful enough to destroy entire buildings, and after the end of Season 8, he's currently the only known living dragon left in the world. Rhaegal here was sort of like the middle child in this family, with a body covered in emerald green and bronze scales. A powerful fighter despite his smaller size, Rhaegal managed to survive his fair share of battles until he was finally killed by a barrage of scorpion bolts from Euron Greyjoy's Iron Fleet, which Dany and his big brother Drogon did not appreciate, to say the least. And then there was little Viserion, the golden-scaled baby brother of the 3. As far as dragons go, he was arguably the most friendly of Dany's boys, up until the Night King here went full Steph Curry from the logo and impaled him with an ice spear, turning him into a zombified ice dragon that he rode into battle against the human armies. Now, Viserion was eventually killed again after the ultimate battle where the Night King was finally defeated, which might make him one of the only dragons in the series to technically die twice. Tough luck, brother. That should pretty much cover Dany and her boys, so now we're ready to talk about the beasts on either side of the conflict from House of the Dragon's Civil War. That's right, we're in for some serious dragon fights, folks, because this time around we've got a total of about 13 individual dragons, separated into 2 opposing teams. On one side are the dragons of Team Black, whose riders support Princess Rhaenyra and her claim to the Iron Throne, and on the other side we've got Team Green and the supporters of Queen Alicent and her sons Aegon and Aemond, even though they've got some family drama of their own going on right now. But let's start with the dragons on Team Black first. Teams are another crucial part of Game of Thrones Legends. You'll need to build up your squad in order to win, just like in the shows. In Game of Thrones Legends, you can team up iconic characters from all Game of Thrones eras. Could you imagine Rhaenyra and Jon Snow riding into battle together? Teamwork makes the dream work. Up first on the side of Team Black, we have, or should I say had, the dragon Arax and his rider Luke Valerian, Princess Rhaenyra's second son. As the first major casualty of the war, Arax here is sort of like the Archduke Franz Ferdinand of dragons if you use your imagination. That's right, you came for a dragon video and got a World War I joke thrown in there. Who says this channel can't be educational? Anyway, Arax was one of the smaller dragons by comparison, with some unique white scales, a golden chest, and a bright yellow frame. Despite his size, he was known to be brave and agile, but that wasn't enough to save him from Luke and Aemond Vhagar, who killed the 2 of them with one mighty chomp over the waters of Shipbreaker Bay, in a surprise attack that played a significant role in starting the conflict. Next, we had Meleys the Red Queen and her rider Rhaenyra Targaryen, the queen who never was, and now, I guess, never will be. Featuring scarlet scales and a crown of copper-colored horns around her head, Meleys' age put her at somewhere around 60, making her one of the oldest and largest dragons at the start of the war. Not only had she seen her fair share of battles, but Meleys here was actually considered to be the single fastest dragon in the sky, which meant that she'd be a formidable opponent in dragon-on-dragon combat, where every split second could make the difference between victory and defeat. Unfortunately though, that didn't stop her from getting absolutely smoked when she got caught up in a surprise attack between Vhagar and Sunfire during the Battle of Rook's Rest. I guess speed and experience can't really help much when you're getting blindsided by a flying lizard the size of the Statue of Liberty. But hey, you at least gotta give her some credit for putting up a good fight. Up next for Team Black is possibly the most unique and battle-tested dragon of the bunch, the lovable Caraxes, the Bloodworm, who was given the nickname because of his blood-red scales and general love for violence. Ridden by the Prince, the two of them have been the veterans of many battles, including their nighttime raids against the opposing forces during the War for the Stepstones. He's a lean, mean killing machine with that kind of face that only a Targaryen can love. And even going all the way back to his days in the Dragon Pit, was known to be the most brutal out of his kind. He may not be the biggest, but he's definitely one to keep your eye on once the fighting really kicks off. And then of course we have Syrax, the yellow-scaled mount of Princess Rhaenyra herself. She's younger than Caraxes, at around 30 years old, and also a bit smaller due to Rhaenyra's decision to keep her mostly chained up and confined to the safety of the Dragon Pit. Much like some other species of reptiles, dragons exhibit an adaptation known as indeterminate growth, meaning that they continue growing larger for as long as they're alive. The first 4 years are the most rapid, with younger dragons quickly growing until they're about the size of a pony. After that, things tend to slow down a little, but it's widely known that the more food that you feed them, and freedom that you give them, the bigger that your dragons are gonna get. They'll grow for as long as they live, and can live for centuries as long as they aren't killed in battle. With one of the oldest dragons from history, Balerion the Black Dread, reaching almost 200 years old. Rhaenyra and Syrax here have been bonded since she was only 7, making her more like family to Rhaenyra than just a beast of battle. This means that Syrax is very well fed, but has less hunting and battle experience than some of the others, which could make a big difference in a fight. Now, after losing Arax and Melees, Team Black here was looking a bit short on dragons, so they decided to bring in some new recruits to help even the odds. The most impressive on the roster is definitely Vermithor, the Bronze Fury, who is almost 100 years old and is the second largest dragon known to exist. He's been claimed by Hugh Hammer, a long-lost Targaryen cousin, and that's going to make him a major player on the battlefield for Team Black, especially when it comes to countering Vhagar. Then there's Vermithor's mate, Silverwing, who's also large and battle-tested, and her rider, Ulf. I think we can all agree that Ulf here isn't exactly what you'd call a knight in shining armor, but they need all the dragons that they can get, so at least old Silverwing here picked someone. And last, but certainly not least, we have good old Seasmoke and his rider, Adam. Although he's on the younger and smaller side, he's also very agile and has experience in battle, even coming in clutch to help the prince out during the siege of Bloodstone, so it's good to have him back on the team. Finally, at the very bottom of our power ranking for Team Black, we have their 3 youngest dragons, the olive-colored Vermax, ridden by Jace Valerian, Baela Targaryen's pale green Moon Dancer, and the young dragon Tyraxes, bound to Joffrey Valerian. But they can still be potentially significant players in a dragon battle, where every bit of power is going to count. Team Black seems like a pretty strong alliance of great houses and dragons, but they are steeped in their historical rivalries and ulterior motives for reaching the Iron Throne. Maybe it's time to start your own great house? Yeah. Form a new house of Westeros and compete against rival alliances in tournaments and special events in Game of Thrones Legends. Now, moving on to Team Green, we start off the order with the dragon who's undeniably the baddest motherfucker in the skies, Nana Vhagar, the queen of all dragons. Vhagar here is an absolute unit, easily surpassing all of the others as the largest and possibly the oldest of all known living dragons. As the only remaining survivor from the days of Aegon's conquest, she's had several riders throughout her 180 years of life, but is currently bonded to Queen Alicent's son, Aemond One-Eye, making her a critical addition on the side of Team Green. She became the first dragon to actually kill another dragon on screen when she and Aemond took out Arax and Luke during their fight above Shipbreaker Bay, and then caught 3 more bodies when she wiped out Melees and Rhaenyra. and even team-killed Sunfire, all at the Battle of Rook's Rest. Talk about a menace to society. When these two crash-outs are around, not even their teammates are safe. This makes her the most battle-hardened and formidable in combat by far, but in dragon fights, size is not everything. It is a lot of the thing, though, and this puts Vhagar at the very top of our dragon power list, at least for now. Next up on Team Green, we had Sunfire, the Golden, who used to be the personal mount of young King Aegon II. If nothing else, he was hard to miss, with his radiant golden scales making him the most magnificent and eye-catching dragon in all of the kingdom. But he was a lot more than just a handsome face. Despite his young age of about 20 years old, Sunfire here was considered to be one of the fastest growing, strongest, and most formidable dragons on the battlefield, ranking him high towards the top of our list. That was until Aegon and Vhagar came along and hit him with some not-so-friendly fire. And rounding out the order for Team Green, we have the blue and silver-scaled Dreamfire, who's bonded to young Helaena Targaryen. At almost 100 years old with a large but nimble build, Dreamfire would be a potentially strong asset for the Greens. But Helaena here just doesn't get out and ride her often, meaning that they might not have the kind of strong rider-dragon bond that you need to win in a battle against another, more experienced dragon. So that should just about cover the dragons that we're going to see fighting it out. But you gotta remember, this story isn't going to have a happy ending. It's about how all of these dragons die. Now that we know what we're up against, we can start coming up with a few ways that we might be able to fight back against them. Hopefully without ending up like the Lannisters' army back at the Battle of King's Landing. We're about to break it all down, but before we do, there's a much better way to go toe-to-toe with a dragon. Just level up your character in Game of Thrones Legends. Instead of staring down a flying, fire-breathing murder beast, just progress through RPG puzzles and engage in dynamic, match-3 puzzle battles. I mean, it's a much safer scenario. From what's happened so far in the shows, we've already seen two main ways that a dragon can be killed. Those are strong projectile attacks like the Night King's Ice Spear, scorpion bolts, or even archers firing at the riders themselves. And also just your classic dragon versus dragon combat, which won't always be one-sided as what went down between Arax and Vhagar, when the fighters are more evenly matched. The most practical anti-dragon weapon that the average army could have in their arsenal seems like it would have to be those scorpions. They've worked in the past, and we know now that they're especially effective if you're able to hit a vital point like the dragon's eyes, neck, wings, or underbelly. Even if it isn't a kill shot, a hit to one of these areas would significantly reduce their effectiveness in combat, and could easily turn the tide of the fight in your favor. You'd want to position the weapons somewhere that would allow you to line up the best possible shot, like in a place where the terrain might force the dragon into a more confined area, and fire multiple scorpions at once if possible in order to maximize your chances of landing a deadly strike. Making it an ambush would be ideal so that the dragon and their rider wouldn't see the initial attack coming. And if you can, it's always better to fight them in bad weather, since dragons have a harder time navigating in the rain. Now, if you're actually lucky enough to have your own dragon, then that levels the playing field dramatically, but it's still going to be an incredibly dangerous fight that needs to be approached with some serious strategy. There isn't one perfect approach, though. Instead, it's going to depend on the combination of the rider and their mount, and their unique strength and weaknesses as a pair. For example, smaller and more agile dragons like Arax would want to use the element of surprise to land a critical hit, or coordinate their attacks with other members from their team. For larger dragons, they'll want to close the distance quickly and take out their opponents with their superior strength before they're able to escape, and circle back around for a counterattack. That covers what we've seen on the show, but these aren't the only methods of potentially fighting dragons that have been used in the series' history. During the era of Valyrian expansion, the Dragon Lords fought a series of battles against a people called the Rhoynar, and during one of these battles, the opposing army was able to use a combination of water magic and archery to actually kill 2 Valyrian dragons. Of course, they then come back with something like 300 dragons and things didn't go so well after that, but it was still a good effort. For other strategies, we could try poisoning the dragons by tainting their food supply or somehow cutting off their food supply entirely to severely stunt their growth. On the flip side, going this route means that there's a chance that they'll just start eating people instead. But just make sure to have plenty of small folk around to use as meat shields if that happens, and you should be fine. If you ask me, what they really need to do is hurry up and invent the F-22 Raptor, because even Nana Vagar would get absolutely washed by just one of those. She may look like Godzilla, but if a scorpion bolt can take these dragons out, then we know for sure that they're clearly not impervious to heat-seeking missiles. For other modern strategies, we could try using ground-based artillery or drones to deal some serious damage without putting a pilot at risk. We'd also have chemical weapons like nerve gas on our side, the potential for biological warfare by engineering and infecting them with specific anti-dragon viruses, or sonic devices to overwhelm the dragon's senses, and either drive them away or possibly stun them with incredibly disruptive noises. Sorry, Valeria, but I guess dragons just aren't as intimidating when you have the modern military-industrial complex on your side. Sadly, there are no F-22s in Game of Thrones Legends, so you'll have to go a different route if you want to defeat your enemies. Sans F-22s, though, you can pair iconic characters with epic weapons from Westeros. Now that we've discussed our dragons, it's time to take a look at our dragon riders, because while a dragon without a rider is a devastating force all on its own, it's the strength of the bond between a dragon and its rider that makes them powerful enough to conquer entire continents. When it comes to iconic dragon riders, no list would be complete without mentioning Dany, the mother of dragons. When she learned to ride Drogon, this made her the first dragon rider in over a century. But she already got her own 8 seasons of glory, so we'll save that discussion for another time. Also, we can't forget Aegon the Conqueror, who, like we mentioned before, pretty much single-handedly conquered all of Westeros, with the help of his 2 sister wives and their dragons, Vagar, Meraxes, and his personal mount Balerion the Black Dread. Although Aegon only commanded a small army of soldiers, the sheer size and power of his dragons allowed him to dominate his enemies with overwhelming force, to the point where he and Balerion literally burned down the entire castle of Harrenhal, where the stone towers glowed red from the heat of his flames like candles against the night sky. As for House of the Dragon, we have to give a shout out to the boys who helped start it all: Aemond One-Eye and little Luke Valerian. While riding Arax, Luke did the best that he could with his dragon's smaller size by using his agility to try and stay out of range of Aemond and Vagar's much more powerful attacks. His strategy nearly worked when Luke was almost able to lose Aemond by cutting through a small ravine where the bigger dragon couldn't follow. The only problem was his lack of experience. Since he didn't have a strong sense of authority over Arax, Luke wasn't able to stop him from circling back around to hit Vagar with some fire, and that was their biggest mistake. We also can't forget the royal couple, Princess Rhaenyra and the Prince. After all, it's Rhaenyra's claim to the Iron Throne that basically started this whole conflict in the first place. But like we mentioned before, although her dragon Syrax has the potential to be pretty formidable, she has no battle experience to fall back on, and therefore might not be able to hold her own in a fight against some of the more battle-tested dragons. The same can't be said for the prince and his mount Caraxes, who've already used their combination of strategy, agility, and pure aggression to change the outcome of countless battles, especially considering that Caraxes has been fighting in wars since before his latest rider was even born. Finally, we have to give an honorable mention to the Night King for being the only zombie in history to ever ride a dragon as far as I can tell. But now it's officially time to break down our top 5 key dragons from the House of the Dragons universe, and some individual ideas for how we might be able to take them down. At 5th place on our list, we're giving this spot to Sunfire, the radiant golden mount of King Aegon II. Although he was young, he was already considered to be large and formidable even for his age. And this ferocious attitude went hand in hand with King Aegon's aggressive and impulsive personality. This made them a serious threat on the battlefield, but it also turned out to be their biggest weakness. You see, Aegon's lack of experience and impulsive behavior was exactly what led him to pick a fight with Meleys and Rhaenyra without considering the risk. An older and wiser rider would have listened to his advisors first instead of rushing into a deadly situation, and that's why he ended up paying the price. But but under the right leadership, Sunfire here had potential to be a major player in any fight. Coming in at number 4, we're going with Meilei's the Red Queen. As the fastest dragon in the kingdom, the only reason that Vhagar was even able to stand a chance in their fight was because of her sheer size, and even then, she still needed a sneak attack to really finish the job. It's like racing a Ferrari against a fully loaded semi-truck. The only way the truck wins is if it can hit you, but if it does, game over. If you're coming up against her, the best bet is to avoid fighting Meilei's in the open sky, where she can easily outmaneuver you, and instead attempt to force her into an area where her mobility is more limited, and you can overpower her with brute force. Or take advantage of the element of surprise like Vhagar, and go in for an ambush before she has a chance to escape. For our number 3 spot, we're going with the good old Caraxes, the Blood Rim, who, along with his rider, has the most battle experience out of any dragon besides Vhagar. He may not be the fastest or the biggest, but his experience in battle and unquenchable thirst for bloodshed make him a top threat in any fight. When facing off with a dragon as brutal as this, you want to end the fight as quickly as possible, so his opponents should try to use either size or maneuverability to their advantage and target his biggest weak point, which is his freakishly long neck. As for ground troops, the key is to fire arrows around Caraxes' slender body and try to hit his rider instead, a strategy that has been proven to work in the past. Alright, for number 2 on our list, it's time to get the real monsters, and I'm giving this spot to Big Daddy Vermithor, the second oldest and largest dragon alive. Now that he's back on the side of Princess Rhaenyra, they've got an absolute tank who can easily contend with any dragon on the battlefield, and even stand toe-to-toe with Nana Vhagar herself. Vermithor here is a one-dragon army all by himself, and if I was fighting in one of these battles, I'd be pretty glad if he was on my side. Because if we've learned anything from kaiju movies, it's that the only way to beat one giant lizard is with an even bigger one. Vermithor could be a key player for the squad. Just like in Game of Thrones Legends, it's all about building your team in order to win epic battles. Player versus player battles with collectible and upgradable champions is just one part of the action that the game offers. Finally, the most powerful dragon at the very top of our list. Who else could the number 1 spot go to besides Big Nana Vhagar? By far the largest and most battle-hardened dragon of them all. She's borderline untouchable except by a coordinated ambush from basically all of Team Black's dragons. And making a play like that would be incredibly risky because they'd surely end up losing some of their own dragons in the process. There's just no way that you're taking on this highly experienced dragon in open combat without also taking significant losses for your own side. So we need to go after Aemond, her inexperienced rider, instead. We could try hitting him with an arrow during a battle, but considering how much protection Vhagar's colossal body gives him, it would be a much better idea to try to get at him while he's on foot. If you can take out Aemond, then that leaves Vhagar riderless, taking her out of the war for a while and opening up opportunities to kill her or possibly even claim her for Team Black's side, which would pretty much end any battle right there. Alright folks, we hope you enjoyed this breakdown of both sides of the conflict, and some of what we might expect to see from our warring dragon riders here in the Game of Thrones universe. If there's one thing we know for sure, it's that after this, all of the dragons in the world are going to be extinct for another 150 years. So we're guaranteed to see them die in some really crazy and interesting ways. Thanks again to today's sponsor, Game of Thrones Legends. Secure your legacy. Download Game of Thrones Legends by clicking the link in the description or scan the QR code to get 50 gold, 3,000 food, and a daily summon token to start your journey. Oh, and wait, don't forget, have a damn good day. Yeah.